Okay, welcome to the Big Ag Show. We have a very special day because what is it this month that is?
You tell us, Bo, what is this month?
I'm learning today. I'm here to learn.
So today is actually this whole entire month is Women's History Month.
Women's History Month.
Yes,
That's right.
yes.
And that's why we chose to do a very special podcast today. And we have four special people who are linked to agriculture in South Florida in one way or another. So, what we're going to do is just really quickly go ahead and let you guys tell the people of this great podcast who you are and how you're connected to agriculture. Where are we starting?
You want me to start? I'll lead the group off. So I guess, do you want me to just roll with my name, the whole jazz? My name, I want to be like, hello, my name is. So I'm Allie Reitz. I am Bo's sister. I work for Everglades Equipment Group. I am in the fourth generation of the family that owns and operates Everglades, and we are, technically a fifth generation farm family from Belglade. So my job and role at Everglades is to work with these fabulous ladies to make sure that we're promoting agriculture and educating people about what we do, not only in the Glades in South Florida, but all of the state of Florida, and how powerful the impact is that we have on our state and our country for our farmers. I think it's a good sum up.
And did you mention what you actually did at Everglades?
Yes, that's what my job is at Everglades. I do PR and community relations and educate.
Gotcha.
I mentioned it. Passing the mic. And this is my beautiful mentor. My self-proclaimed mentor. So
I'm Artist Hammock. I'm part of a 106-year-old family farm. It's really unique that Frierson Farm was began on the southwest shore Lake Okeechobee by our farm patriarch, Ed Frierson. And the interesting part of that is my husband's worked there 51 years. My son Robert's only the third generation. So when you think of a farm 106 years old, you think there's going to need more generations, but there's not. There's only the third generation farming there now. And hopefully the three grandchildren that live next door to me will be the fourth generation. I've been married to a farmer for 48 years. It was been said that when you marry a farmer, you're married to the land also, and I truly believe that. And it's in my blood. My dad was a farmer, so I had it from that side of my family too. I am the paper pusher for the family farm. I do all things that have to do with finance and paper pushing, whether it's insurance or compliance. I also have a side job where I help represent farmers who have an appeal before Farm Service Agency, which is true of most women in agriculture. If you're a family farmer, is working off farm. It tends to be that the family farm doesn't support you enough to have that to be your only job. So I've always worked off farm besides my own farm job.
It's amazing.
really quick, Tony, I've got some very good pictures of artists for what she just said. You need to give him the one of your family. And she's got a selfie driving the tractor.
Yeah, but I can't do that.
Yeah, I need to see.
Can you take a picture of all that?
We'll get him with. Oh yeah, he'll be snapping. You'll see me in a few. I do want to mention that.
That was the first time that's been asked in the podcast, and these are the first ladies we've had in the podcast. That the picture, can we take a picture? All the other people were like, why did they just take a photo?
Yeah.
When Tony busts the camera out.
I think it's very important that you
I
document
love it.
this opportunity.
Yeah.
Artist, that was you actually almost brought me to tears with what you said with when you marry a farmer, you marry the land. That's so beautiful to say that, and I'm going to share that on other occasions when I'm talking. But just to kind of piggyback back off of what the two of you said. So I'm Jessica Clasby, and I'm really going to get emotional. That really struck me. And I'm the director of the Florida Sugarcane League, and I have the blessing to be able to represent the 1% that feed 100% of the world. Our county is so diverse, and we have 66 billionaires that live on the island, and we have the 1% that's feeding everybody. That's pretty powerful just in this space alone. So I get to share the message of the farmers, share the message of everybody that touches the farm. And a lot of people don't realize just what it takes to go into it. And that's what I get to do day in, day out through my team. So, yeah.
Love it.
Awesome. Well, I'm Shiva Ahrens. I'm a principal research scientist for Florida Crystals. So I'm not married to a farmer, but I work for a group of people who own the land, and I feel like I own the land as well. So as a part of my job, I oversee the fertilization, which we all know is one of the controversial subjects in this area. And I also in charge of some of the sustainability projects for our company. And yeah, that's what I do for my job. And I feel like I'm so lucky because I live on the northern side of the county, Palm Beach County, but also I work on the west side. So I'm very privileged that every single day I can experience both sides of the county. So, and I'm happy to be here with these wonderful ladies.
That is awesome. So I think let's jump right into, you guys all just introduce yourself and people got a little glimpse of what you do. If you don't mind, I'm just going to go right down the line here and ask you a bit deeper question on each of y'all's what you do. So starting here with Shiva, what are some of the main things that you're focusing on while you're doing your job? Like what are the big things that you're thinking about?
Well, working for a big agricultural company, you know that as a part of the big group, you're responsible to provide food and also keep your land healthy. So, and that's one of our main focuses in Florida Crystals. I mean, in agriculture companies in general. So, obviously, we want to do our job right, and at the same time, we want to turn in profit for the company. So I feel like keep this balance sometimes can be difficult working with different groups of people, different ethnicity, which is the beauty of of my job. So I can experience working with different nationalities, men, women. I feel like that's amazing. It's a big group of people, but at the same time, we're all pursuing one goal, and that's producing food and also providing jobs for our community.
Gotcha. Awesome. And Jessica, what are the big things you're thinking about at what you do? What do you do exactly?
So I'm going to actually talk about something that Shiva does that she doesn't always share, but she's brilliant. She's a scientist, and she really works with the soil. And because of her, Florida Crystals has been able to be rock certified organic. That's huge. That's a major step for an organization. And it came from her need to wanting to do it to make it better. And so she's not going to tell you that, but she's very humble with that. But you need to point that out because that's incredible. That's the highest certification that you can get. And that's all because of her and her
You
job.
said rock certified organic.
SCAR Regenerative Organic Certification is the highest level of certification that you can get for a food product. It's above USDA.
And basically it's just saying that this food is super safe,
Yes,
organic.
organic, and is regeneratively produced, which means that not only you produce food, but you also protect your land and you restore it to make sure that you can pass it on to the future generation.
And when you're saying protect your land, what are some of the risks that you're dealing with?
Well, you know that when you pursue regenerative agriculture, you have to eliminate a lot of practices that people do in other side of the country. What I mean, like a lot of chemical applications, fertilization, touching the land a lot. So all these things can harm your land over time. Those are the things that we don't do, or we try to reduce as much as possible to be able to protect our land so we can have food for a longer time, increase our agricultural resilience.
And what are some of the brands, just for listeners out there, what are some of the brands that Florida Crystal represents?
So we have obviously our Florida Crystals brand, we can find those beautiful jars in the grocery stores here. And we also have Domino, and we have Red Path in Canada. We have European brands like Sedul in Portugal, and we have CNH on the west coast of US.
Because I want people, if they see those brands, to know what you just said. And one other question for you, where did you go to school?
So I went to school, started my journey of education, obviously, in my lovely home country, Iran. I did my bachelor's and master's there, and for PhD, I came to US. Well, I wanted to have a bigger job and more opportunities. That's why, unfortunately, I had to leave my country and say goodbye to family and friends. So, everything has a pay, right? So that was my payment that I had to do to be able to get here. So I went to school in Indiana. I went to IU and I got my PhD in soil biogeochemistry. I know it's very it sounds very specific, and it is a specific, but it brought a lot of opportunities for me.
How did you choose that?
Well, that's a longer story, but I mean, I'm probably you ladies have heard this story before. So I came from a very, very big city. We're talking about somewhere like Manhattan. So I grew up somewhere like there. I came from the capital of Iran, which is Tehran. And growing up, we always lived in a small apartments. You know how New York is. It's very similar to that. And so we never even had a garden. So the only thing that I had like little garden boxes, and that's all I had. And I had to grow like small things here and there. And then I was not happy with it, but for the time being, that's all I had. So I decided to go to school and study agriculture. And I always had this dream to have a big yard, big garden. So that was the start of the journey, and now I have 190,000 acres of.
Yeah, I was gonna say you are working for one of the largest.
Yes.
That's really cool stuff. All right, Jessica.
All right. So my whole background is completely different because I didn't have I didn't want to go to school to be a scientist, and I didn't grow up into the family. I didn't marry into the family, but how it shifted for me is I worked for a chamber, and one of my first times ever going on a tour was with Rick Roth. And I had a soft spot because he introduced me to this whole nother world of this county that I had no idea existed. And when I said to him, why don't more people know about this? And he goes, that's what we're doing, Jess. And I was like, I've got to do this. So I'm very optimistic. So I actually put on my vision board, I do every year, that I wanted to work in agriculture. And I put down to a T, like everything that I wanted. So through the chamber, we had built up our tours from like a minivan to 10 55 passenger buses by the time I left. And everywhere that I went, I always said, we need to do a tour. We need to bring it out. So I'd reach out to Caroline. We would connect and bring a tour out. And I'm like, I would love to do this, but it's a hard industry to break into, right? And so I just always stay active and involved and introduce myself to people. And then one day I got a call. And the call was, hey, we want to know if you consider being part of our team. And I was like, well, at the time I was running my own business because I didn't want a boss. And so I was like, well, who am I working for? And then they told me, and I'm like, no way. So I was like, I need to interview everybody in the office to see if it's something that's going to fit with me, because culture was a big thing. And so I did. I sat down and I interviewed with everybody one-on-one. And then when I interviewed with my boss at the time, everything he told me he wanted was what I wrote on my vision board 10 years prior. And so
Can we mention what company this is, or?
the Florida Sugarcane League.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So then,
But really quick, the buses that you had before this in your own business, you were doing tours.
oh, no. I had a totally different, I was in boutique business of
Okay.
clothing and jewelry. Yeah. And so it had nothing to do with agriculture, but I always wanted to stay involved somehow. And so I think just for my being involved and my love of it and really educating other people. I wasn't even in the industry, but I was asking people to come on tours. I was a Farm Bureau member before I was even part of ag. So I really dove into it. I even had an ag tag way before. So, I mean, I was a huge supporter and not knowing where my life was going to be today. And I'm very blessed about that. But I got on board, and then I just took the ball and went with it. And I was kind of like, hey, oh, by the way, I'm doing this. I don't know if I need to get your permission, but I'm bringing out this group and this group. And I'm just really making awareness of Palm Beach County ag, right? Not a lot of people who grew up here the whole entire life have no idea what's here. And that really blows my mind. And so then in 2018, in 2022, I was promoted to the first female director of the Florida Sugarcane League. Yeah. So I was pretty excited about that. And I didn't know if that was ever going to be a possibility. And my leader saw something in me, and I appreciate it. And we've just kind of bloomed from there. So it's been pretty awesome. So for me, when I get to take people out that have never been before, I like to start, we call it the 20-mile bend here. And I always tell people, do you know why this area is so significant to this county? And most of the time they don't. And I say, we're truly in the center of the county. So we're 20 miles from Lake Okeechobee and 20 miles from Palm Beach. But right here is where all this agriculture has started. All this agriculture has grown. And I was like, primarily you're going to see sugarcane, but if you were to look at the letters, the pictures within the sign of the Everglades, it'll tell you all different commodities that are grown here. So when I tell them the amount of food that's grown here and what we do, to see their eyes open and say, I can't believe that was here. For me, I love to bring people to actually meet the farmers, actually meet the scientists, meet the people who are involved in it, because they're people like you and I, right? Back in the day when you thought of farmers, you had a different picture in your mind. But farmers today are our neighbors. And so like that's the biggest thing I want to make it reality. So when you're eating, you have a better appreciation for what you're eating for. And I love it now because people will call me and say, I found that Fresh from Florida logo and I bought it, or I specifically bought this because it said grown in Belle Glade, or and I love that. And they're sharing it with all their friends. I mean, even when I go up to Massachusetts to see my family and they buy like Peril Farms, I'm like, oh my gosh, I get so pumped about it. And to them, it's just vegetables, but to me, it's an impact, right? And so, and I love it, and I want other people to like feel that. And so for me, especially like going forward, the youth, that's so powerful, right? They're our future. And so I'm really making a big strive to bring more students out for them to really learn it, because when I've done presentations to them, I say to them, where do you think your food comes from? Unfortunately, now it's Amazon shipped, Uber, like how it gets here. I'm like, that's how it got here, but how do you think it was actually grown? And they don't know. And that's because that's lost. And so that's a big initiative for me. But when I bring people out and they get to see the farming lands and they just see acres and acres of like romaine lettuce, or we throw in those jokes, right? Like iceberg ahead, remain calm. But, like stuff like that. But I want them to have an understanding of like what it is out there and why it's out there. And when they see it, they can't believe it. Right. And then they're just like, I can't believe this is actually grown right here. And then I can go down the street to whatever restaurant and order, and I know it came from there. And so that's very eye-opening for me. And then for them to tell me, I had no idea, and now I'm going to make a difference.
And you guys probably have between all of you, have some good statistics about that area. Do you have any on the top of your head that?
Oh yeah. I mean,
you just shout them out
do you got another hour?
quick?
Sure.
Yeah.
So there's 1 billion servings of lettuce that's grown out in the Everglades. We have 1 billion servings of sweet corn. We actually grow enough sweet corn that we can circle the earth ear to ear 3 times, which is pretty powerful when you think about that. And we are the sweet corn capital of the world, March, April, and May. And then we have about 350 million servings of celery. So I always ask people, like, who loves celery? And when they tell them that, they're like, whoa, think of wings. Think of things that you put in your soup, right? Radishes.
Bloody Marys.
Huh?
Bloody Marys.
Yeah, Bloody Marys. Radishes, 250 million servings of radishes. I mean, radishes is a quick cover crop that we can do 3 times over, right, before we switch over to sugarcane. Rice, we can feed 175 million people with just the rice that's grown here in Belle Glade. And if you were to Google rice mills in the world, we might necessarily pull up because we're just feeding South Florida. There's other ones that are massive, but that's just a small amount of things that we grow. And there's definitely a ton, but that's a huge impact. And of course, our main crop is sugar.
Oh yeah,
It's nothing but sweeter than that.
that is correct.
Yeah.
And if I can just add something to it, all these things that Jessica mentioned is about food, which is great, and that's our main focus. Specifically about sugarcane, one thing that a lot of people don't know that is very sustainable crop. We have almost 0 waste from this crop, which means that whatever that comes out of this crop, other than sugar, which is the main product, everything else is being used. Like, for example, in our company, with the amount of electricity that we produce from the fiber, burning the fiber of sugarcane, we can light up the whole city of Wellington. So,
Yeah.
Can you explain that just a little bit? Like for someone who doesn't fully understand that, you're producing electricity from burning the fiber from sugarcane?
So when you process sugarcane, so you extract the juice, and that's where the sugar comes from. And then you also end up with a lot of fiber. We use that fiber, we burn it to produce electricity. And that electricity is being used in our processing, milling, and everything, which means that all the electricity that is needed for the operation is coming from the plant. We're actually now 80% powered by the plant.
Yeah. So sugarcane, not only does it produce sugar, it produces power, but it also produces paper products. So we have a company called TELUS, and they use the outside. So the sugarcane looks like a bamboo. So the outside layer of that sugarcane, they use for. They can make the paper products, TELUS, bowls, to-goes, compost. The amazing thing about, you could probably talk more about how they compose.
You can order those off of Amazon.
Yeah.
The link. We'll put the link in
Yeah. The link
the description.
Affiliate link.
We will certainly do that.
Yeah.
Tellus is an Italian word for earth.
So tell us more
And
about it.
everything else that is not being used, other than like producing electricity, sugar, and everything that is left over goes to our compost facility, and we produce compost. We bring it back to our fields to replace our fertilizer. So about 20% of our purchased fertilizer comes from our compost facility.
So what an amazing that our crop, we grow it for us to use. We also have it to run our mills, and we make paper products, and then we're bringing it back to the fields. Yeah, it's incredible, and a lot of people don't realize that, and so that's
Just side note, because you seem like the person that can answer this question. What about the problem with the soil getting lower and lower? Is that how are we?
Correct. So with the soil that we have is very high in organic matter. We're thinking about like 30 to 70% organic matter. Outside of this area, if you have like up to 3% of organic matter, you're so lucky. So here we are very, very fortunate that we have this type of soil. We call it mock soil or histosol. That's the scientific name. So that's the nature of this soil because of high organic matter is prone to subsidence. And you can lose soil over time. But with the practices that we have adopted in this area, for example, planting rice, when you plant the rice, you have to flood the field. You put cover crop. With all these practices, we make sure that the soil is covered at all time during the year to make sure it's not in touch with the air to get oxidized. So that's how we reduce. We cannot stop it, but we can reduce the rate of soil subsidence.
Do y'all have any math behind like when it will, get too low to farm?
good. Well, let me before she gets into that, but I also would love artists to talk about why we have such muck soil out there in the area. But at the UF IFA site, there's a subsidence post, and at one point it was at 9 feet. That's when they put that post down. We're now hovering around the 3 feet mark. In the 80s, they projected that we would not have any farmland here in order to farm the muck soil. The farmers have done such an amazing thing about being good stewards of their land that they want to farm it to continue on for more and more generations, that they're doing the composting, bringing things back in. So now I don't see that in the future, anytime future. I can probably guarantee that we'll be farming for like another 100 years out here with all the practices that we're going. And there's more and more things that are being innovated to happen. But at one point we were losing like an inch, half an inch. Now it's just very little that we're losing.
That is truly amazing.
Because we did not know better. In the past, the farming was like old practices, but now the farming is not like, as Jessica mentioned, is not like the old days. We have a lot of technology. We have a lot of tools that we use to protect our land and our soil.
Very good. Artist. Hello.
She was talking about practices that come under the cover, for me, of best management practices. And every farm is required to do those. And we voluntarily did them before they were required. There's a program under FDACS called CARES, this Farm CARES, and I lost the acronym for it, and my internet doesn't work to pick it up. But that designation means that you've done everything that you're responsible for to have a sustainability. So a farmer, for me as a farm family, because our farm patriarch, even though he plowed with a horse and mule, he didn't know any different than what he was doing then for the technology at the time. And as that technology evolved, thankfully it has. And the technology we have today has so been put into farming. We're only about 700 acres. We only have sugarcane. We do have a couple farmers who will rent farmland from us. It's going to be fallow, so they'll put sweet corn on it, putting back into the soil, like Shiva said, and then also a cover crop. So for us to have best management practices, it's looking for the future, so those grandchildren will have a place and have soil to farm on, so if they choose. The other part of that is being dictated to by acronyms. Like Shiva said, that there's certain things that we do, but as a farmer, you've got so many agencies that dictate what you'll comply, whether it's EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, through whatever herbicide or pesticide you may have to use, not because you just go out and use it, it's because you have to. You have a worm eating your corn or a worm eating your cane as you plant it. And one of the things Shiva said about rice, one of the really neat things about rice is if you grow it, even for us, it's too far to haul to the mill. It's not financially feasible to do that. We'll grow it, not let it head, disc it back in, and then when we plant sugarcane on that, we don't have to put an insecticide because those little bugs in the ground can't hold their breath for 30 days. So they're not going to be there, and then that keeps us from using an insecticide. Back to that pumping practice, more than paid for not using an insecticide that you didn't need to use. So as farmers, we're always looking for ways to improve what we do that's just not only financially responsible, but earth responsible, because we are the original environmentalist, in my opinion, and will continue to be. Farmers don't brag. We don't talk about all the great things that we do to put those 1 out of every 5 teaspoons of sugar on your table that come from Florida. So 1 out of every 5 teaspoons of sugar the consumer consumes is coming from Florida. So why would you brag about what you do that you're so proud of? We don't. And one of the things that farmers did many years ago was did a self-taxing district, the only one in the United States, the Environmental Protection District. We pay $5 an acre taxing ourselves to say that we're going to use that money to have sound science developed to come up with solutions that we have issues with on our farms, whether it be for water or for soil. And we have used that money to hire outside scientists to come and bring solutions. So farmers are always looking for a way to increase not only production to feed our consumers, but to also sustain a future for their farm.
And to piggyback on that, they also pay a $25 privilege tax.
If you're in the Everglades agriculture area, so you're paying a tax on top of a tax. But we chose to say that we need solutions. We're putting our money where our mouth is. We're not just talking about we have a problem here, we're going to ignore it. We want to be part of the solution, and we have proven that we're part of the solution, because one of the main problems that people see about is the water. We have a whole water quality issue, is what they perceive about our area. Well, what people need to remember is phosphorus is what has been deemed as the culprit. So where does that come from? If you have rain in South Florida, you're going to have anywhere from 70 to 90 parts per billion of phosphorus in your rainwater and the water that falls on your land that you have no control over. And I love the example of what is a part per billion. I'm not like Shiva, a scientist, but it's one blade of grass on a football field. It's one drop of water in an Olympic-sized football field. So what are the standards for the Everglades National Park? It's 10 parts per billion of phosphorus. So if I were to pick up the bottle of water I have under this table and go pour it out in the Everglades, I would be in violation of those water quality standards. The rain falling on the Everglades is in violation of those water quality standards. So it's kind of like a craziness to think of me that you've got to clean up the water cleaner than rainwater. And farmers are part of that solution for the water. So we get water from Lake Okeechobee for irrigation, and we're very blessed with that. And it's mostly gravity fed. Some of it is pumped. When it comes out of Lake Okeechobee, it's mostly come 97% north from Lake Okeechobee. Farmers and residents south of the lake are not allowed to put any water back into the lake unless it is flood conditions. And it would have to be deemed by the Corps of Engineers or South Florida Water Management, like in a hurricane season, that the city's going to flood or there's chances that canals are going to flood. So you would be able to put some water back into the lake. That's the only time. So the water that people are all up in arms right now, currently, as we're sitting here about water going to the East Coast and West Coast, has not come off of sugarcane fields. It's not come off of vegetable fields. It's not come off of any cities south of the lake. It has all come north. So the headwaters of the Everglades are up near Reedy Creek in Orlando. And if you look at that old system, it's from south flowing from north to south. So when people talk about old Everglades, they need to remember that anything west of I-95 was old Everglades. So yes, our farm was old Everglades, but so are the millions of people in South Florida that are living here. So the beginning of that flood control system was the Central and South Florida flood control. And it was to provide flooding and water for South Florida residents. And it was to dike and dredge it. It was the only thing that they left out of it, and the system worked perfectly, is the environment. So back to what she has said, we have come a long way from knowing what's important. So now we have to retrofit the environment into a system that was not designed for that, nor was it designed for over 8 million people living here now. So we all are in this together, and we all share responsibility. So the blame game should not be on anyone. We're all part of who's living here in South Florida and want to continue to share the beauty that we have here.
What are we doing today in the Everglades to solve the water problem? Or before we answer that, can we answer what is the water problem?
So the water problem that persists is too much water. And how do we have too much water? and you have a system that flows from north to south. So my example is if you have a 2-story house and you have a bathtub on the second floor and your faucet's leaking and you don't take care of it, eventually your bathtub is going to fill up. And then one day you're going to notice a leak on your first floor coming out of the ceiling. And you're thinking, oh, I have a leak. Well, no, you don't have a leak. You didn't turn the faucet off in the bathtub. And that's what's happened, in my opinion, is the faucet's never been turned off from the water coming north from the lake into the lake.
Why is too much water a problem?
Well, it would be just like if you had water flowing through your front door and back door. Water flooding is an issue anywhere where it is. Right now, the lake at Lake Okeechobee is over 16 feet. That is not feasible to maintain for fish hatchery, for recreational activities, as well as safety for anybody, even coastal as well as inland people, for safety of a hurricane. Although the dike has been, rehabbed to sustain it better than what it used to be, but we cannot continue to have a lake level that high. That the reason it's that high is because of all the rains that we had, whether it was even back to Ian and Idalia, the rains that have come from just abnormal El Nino weather. In this winter, we've had abnormal rains. So that water's got to go somewhere. So they've held it in the lake. And now it's time to, as they say, pay the piper. And you've got to let some of that water out of the lake.
And that seems like the problem for somebody in Belglade, right? Or in the Western community. What's the problem for the people maybe living on the coast?
So their take on it is that we don't want the lake water to come to the East Coast or to the West Coast. But what's interesting, if you followed when there was no lake releases for over a year, they still had water quality issues. And why is that? You cannot have millions of residents in Florida who still have a septic tank. The city of Clewiston has stepped up to the plate. They're 100% sewer, so that issue is not there. So if you go to the Florida Department of Health and pull up septic tanks, you're going to see millions of septic tanks that are in Florida that are not inspected, that are old, that are going to have leakage, and you have 10 inches of rain come into the coastal area, and you're going to have some problems with septic tank water leaching out. It's just the way a septic tank works. It can't be any other way. So for me, back to the blame. Don't blame people being this together. Go in and so what I would like to see environmental groups do who like to blame farmers for the problem is, why don't you take some of that money that you've collected at the $5,000 plate dinners and go into a residential area where maybe it's an older residential, older folks, residents, and say, let us help you pay for sewer connection. Let us help you solve this issue. And that's back to farmers saying with our own self-taxing district, if we're part of the problem, we want to be part of the solution. So I feel like it's a whole connection issue here where coastal, urban, and inland rural areas, we're in this together. So let's be part of the solution together.
Is that the two big factors, septic tanks and lake water, that are kind of roaming around the conversations of this debate?
It is for me. Other people have a different opinion, but everybody's entitled to their opinion.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, I think one of my goals, and probably like many other Floridians, is getting a better understanding of this argument, because you hear like the most surface level statements about it, but nobody really ever goes deeper.
You know, like Shiva being a scientist, for us in our farm, we're going to have our soil tested. We're going to find out how much fertilizer does it need. Why would I spend $700 or $1,200 a ton for fertilizer if I don't need it? It's not going to grow more crop. It's just going to be wasteful. So everything that we do, and I'm the person who sees about the compliance. I do the fertilizer audits that we have to comply with FDAC's rules, Florida Department of Ag and Consumer Services, for those who don't know that acronym. And that's part of the problem is we get thrown those acronyms, but what do they really mean? So for me, that's what I do. So our farm is composed of my husband, my son, and myself. We don't have any other hired help and manage that 700 acres. We do contract the harvesting and do contract the planting because as a small farmer, we can't afford to buy from John Deere those $500 million harvesters and have 5 of them in a field to harvest our crop. So that's how our business plan works. And also for us, it's always been that God's first, family second, and farm. And most of the time, farm gets shifted to second and family third of how the money goes. But that's what we know going into it, because it's important for us to be debt free as farmers on our farm plan, and also to know that we're blessed to live where we are and to have what we have, and to do what is necessary to preserve that next generation coming up. And that was how it was handed to us.
And you said this kind of started, that last statement started from you're testing your soil. Do people in Florida think that farms are the reason why the water's bad?
I believe that belief is out there. I think that they think that a farmer just goes out and dumps whatever he thinks might be needed to grow his crop, and that's the opposite 180 from how it really happens. So not only do you look at, for us, for sugarcane, we're part of the U.S. sugar family. We have grown and sent our cane to United States Sugar Corporation since 1938. We're one of the first independent growers to sell to U.S. Sugar. And with that, we have the advantage of having all of our fields but 1.5 mile from the rail system. So all the sugar cane delivered to the United States Sugar Corporation is through rail. That takes over 2,000 semi-trucks a day back to sustainability. What are you doing to make that sustainable? And for us, that crop is the most sustainable, regenerative, like Shiva said, for us to have. And that has worked for us, and it's worked for us to manage that crop, where maybe corn takes a little more labor, or maybe radishes. They're all mechanical now. Radishes are mechanically planted, mechanically harvested, but you have to have the input to buy that stuff to do that, and that's just not something that our farm chooses to do.
Right.
Can I mention one thing? So another thing, because artists just reminded me, agriculture, specifically down here in the Everglades agricultural area, they are the only industry that buy retail and sell wholesale. There's no other industry in the world that does that.
We're price takers, not price makers.
Yes, and so and that's, a lot of people just need to be educated about farmers and what they do. And so when I tell them that, they are blown away by that. But that's a huge thing.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
You want to say, I don't have any control over what U.S. Sugar tells me that the price of sugar is that they're able to sell that product for. They tell us, and I assume it's Florida Crystals, if they have independent growers, they tell us how much they're going to pay us for the crop. And so we know what that number is going to be, and we have to make everything work into that number. Some years it's a little lower, some years it might be a little higher. Some years maybe India didn't produce a crop, and so the world market out there, which is a yard sale price for sugar. So the argument is that consumers are having to buy sugar and they could buy it less if it was just brought into the U.S. The way that works, there's, for the U.S. sugar program that's part of the Farm Bill, there are 40 favored nations that have access to the amount of sugar that the U.S. needs that we're not able to produce from beet or cane sugar. So those countries get first dibs at bringing it in. And when we don't have enough supply, maybe we've had a hurricane in Louisiana, or beet growers have had a different freeze before their beets are processed, and we need to bring in a little more, then those countries get the opportunity to do that. But then you've got Brazil, who just flips a switch and either makes ethanol out this side or sugar out this side, and they choose which one is paying more or which one the country has the need more. We don't have that option. But they also say, well, I produced 2 million tons too much this year. I got to get rid of it. So if you have too much stuff in your house, what do? Some people choose to have a yard sale. So that sugar on the red market is simply a yard sale price to get rid of sugar that's been overproduced by other countries. It is not their first crop that they're trying to get rid of. It is what's left over. It's their leftovers.
Gotcha. Did you have something you want to say?
I just want to add something to what these two ladies mentioned about the water and the nutrients. So we have actually gone above and beyond to protect our soil and our water. So not only we do soil testing every single crop, which is not necessarily required, but we do that. And the other thing I want to mention that most people might not know is actually fertilization is our number one expense in our ag operations. It is super expensive. So who wants to spend more than you need? Like, if your plant can uptake a certain amount, what is the point of adding too much fertilizer? You're just losing money and you're contaminating your resources. That's why we take soil sample every single year and we add fertilizer as much as we need, not more, not less. And we have, when I say we have gone above and beyond, we are replacing a part of our purchased fertilizer with the organic in-house produced compost that we apply to our fields. And the other thing is that the nature of this soil, the mock soil or the histosoil, is that it acts like filter. The water that comes to our fields has more nutrients than when it leaves the fields. So we basically clear the water and we send it to Everglades.
And I would like to add for Shira, how does that affect the consumer, those practices that we're doing on our farm? So for me, if you look at it, sugar is so cheap when you walk in a restaurant, it's free. You pick up a package off the table and you didn't pay for it. So extra condiments now, when you order a burger, you pay for extra condiments or extras, but you don't ever pay for sugar. I just made 5 pounds of fudge to give away for Valentine's Day, made them in half-pound boxes, and I took my grocery, bought only the ingredients for that fudge, and I ordered boxes that you could pour the fudge in that were heat sensitive. The box cost $1. It cost $4.82 to make the 5 pounds of fudge. Out of that $4.82, the box was $1, the packaging, and the sugar cost 62 cents. The other ingredients was evaporated milk and butter and chocolate chips. And the chocolate cost twice as much as the sugar. So as a consumer, they're getting a price that is not, it's affordable. And the other part of that is when you buy American agriculture, you have the most stringent requirements on your food safety than anywhere in the world. So you've got safe, affordable, abundant food supply. So when you buy that bag of celery, you buy those radishes, you buy that bag of rice, you know that chemicals have not been put on your food that are harmful to you as a consumer, contrary to other countries who are still allowing those chemicals to be put on the food and brought to the U.S.
That's amazing. You know, and the other thing I'll say about what you said is I've heard this argument about the lake water, and basically you're saying that if the argument is that farmers are out there just slinging fertilizer around and our water's getting dirty, you're actually saying that, no, we're using the least amount of fertilizer we possibly can, and the water passing through this soil is actually getting cleaner. Sometimes it's hard to digest like such a bold statement, you know?
And what's amazing is we have statistics behind that.
Yeah.
So like that's a
she
huge
was
thing.
and she was
Yeah.
we got the science.
I'm going to tell you, though, I'm going to get a septic guy on this podcast because I want to hear the other side of this, which is very interesting. Allie, what about from the PR world and the tractor dealerships that you guys deal in?
Before we go to that, to sit with these three, I am incredibly blessed that Everglades has allowed me, and I am so sorry for my voice to all of the listeners out there.
Fix this with audio.
I can do a lot.
Thank goodness. I'm incredibly blessed that Everglades as a John Deere dealership sees value in allowing me to advocate with these three, because I sit here and I'm like almost afraid to talk because the things coming out of y'all's mouths, you're so intelligent, you're so articulate, you're so wise. It is.
Well, I'll second that too. Like it's very impressive. I think we're on like the 12th podcast now. And I hate to tell the dudes that we've done podcasts with, they need to get their stuff together because you guys understand it.
Yep.
You know, and I haven't heard a single group of people break down the problems we just discussed. And artists, I mean, you might need to get into politics because you were ready to roll, and that was really, really good. Well put.
Artist goes to DC and speaks on our behalf. She goes to Tallahassee and speaks on our behalf. I mean, the way that she will say things, it'll come out. It will leave everybody completely.
She makes politicians
speechless.
cry,
Yes.
and not in a
Yes.
not in a negative way,
Negatively.
in a empathetic.
Yes.
Yeah, she's not bullying.
Yes.
No.
And every time that she speaks, it is a mic drop moment. I mean, honestly, it's very incredible. I can't even believe I'm sitting here with you with this. Actually, to be honest with you.
So for me, it's all about a mama bear protecting her cubs. And that is how I see the three women that I'm sitting here with. we're all protecting not only our livelihoods, but our way of life. And it's a precious, sweet way of life. Years ago, when I had the privilege of starting our family, our son's 41 now, I did business cards and started putting our family picture on the back because I loathe the slant the environmental community has put that we're big sugar. Amen. I loathe it. We're not big sugar, we're real sugar. We're family sugar. And I consider it a privilege for us to be part of the U.S. Sugar family. It's a privilege to be part of the Florida Sugarcane League family. It's a privilege to be part of Florida Crystal's family that is an arm of who we all are. And that extends to Everglades Farm, Farm Group, to know that you have and I'll even include Glade and Grove, you have equipment dealers in the Glades that look at all, whether we're a family business or not, we're a family. And we're all in this together. And for me, that is how our agriculture community has survived for years on years in the Glades. Is we're in this together. And Allie's part of that because she gets a voice to speak up to an audience that I don't get to talk to. Jessica the same way. And so it's an integral part of a puzzle. And Allie needs to talk about how she's part of that puzzle.
I love you. And I want you to notice advocacy is probably a key word in this table right now. So to Everglades has allowed me to be an advocate, and it is the most beautiful marriage because I'm not advocating for John Deere. I mean, we sell tractors to ag, we sell lawnmowers to commercial landscapers, we sell skid steers to construction workers, we sell equipment to equestrian folks, we sell residential light riding lawnmowers to people who don't even understand agriculture, to the people getting on Jessica's tours, right? But to be able to advocate for our group of customers that, like she said, don't necessarily get to advocate for themselves is such a wonderful, blessed experience. And I think my brother and I's great-grandfather started the business, and our grandfather, who's living today that we spend time with, he lives and dies by giving. I mean, I joke that he cannot give his money away fast enough, and the Lord just continues to bless him because it is ingrained in who he is. And there'll be times my grandmother will complain that he's handing out money to somebody who's asking, and he'll say, "You haven't missed a meal, have you?" It's just who he is. So I think he's instilled that in the dealership and in the culture of the dealership. We have 18 locations now, and you can see them on the wall up there, but every one of those, I know, we got to fix those. Every one of those dealerships and locations have been empowered to do what they can for their community. And Belglade being our heartbeat, our mothership, it's obviously where my heartbeat lies, but it's so important because that farming community from the Glades, Hendry County, Palm Beach County, that is the heartbeat of Florida agriculture too. And there are massive farms around the state, from strawberries to peanuts to cattle, blueberries. But what is done in what is done in Southern Florida helps the voice of Florida agriculture around the state. And so the more times that we can advocate to non-educated agriculture entities, the better, because we do have to stand among Senate, Congress. We have congressional staffers we bring to town twice a year just to educate them because they're working on the farm bill and they hear about the Midwest, corn and soybeans. They don't hear about the vegetable capital of the world. They don't hear about sugar. And so it might get missed. So for them to put a face, a family to that name, to that farm, is so much more impactful than just big sugar and the stupid stigma of that. It is brutal. So for Everglades, I get to spend time advocating for our customers, and it's just a huge blessing that I thank the good Lord for every day because it's fun. And I work with people like these three and H&A and cattle farms, Sam Ferris, who works for Farm Bureau, who works with Artis and I and Jessica and Shiva. Her husband's an 8th generation cattle rancher, I believe.
Eighth generation.
To Artis's point, 100 years of farming is only 3.
Well, for our family,
But
that dynamics.
it's pretty
Other
similar.
families, there's been a different dynamics. It's just the way to have a husband who's worked for the same farm for 51 years is coming up in
Wild.
May is wild.
And name another industry that could say that. You can't.
For me, part of the education with consumers is they need to realize that agriculture is America's heartbeat and her backbone. And having a dad, my parents were older, who served in World War II, was in the Battle of the Bulge, in the trenches, where he saw people starving in France, where he saw the awful hard stuff. My dad instilling in me about our country has to know that unlike countries in Europe at the time that couldn't feed themselves, the day that we cannot feed ourselves, we will no longer be a republic. We will no longer be a democracy. So American consumers need to get on board to realize that when they see a farm bill coming up, that's not a farm bill. It's a consumer bill. Yes, to ensure that you have safe, affordable food supply that you can rely on and go to Publix and there's going to be food on the shelf. If you think that COVID-19 did not make you realize the importance of having food on the shelf, you have seen nothing that will happen the day that America is dependent on a foreign government for part of its food supply.
My dad likes to say, to Artis's point, during COVID, when you saw the ships sitting out there with all of the Gatorade bottles missing from the shelves, that was brutal, but you still had your agriculture products sitting in that grocery store. Yes. And the day that those cargo ships are holding our food supply.
Yeah. And it wasn't the farmers that were holding off too. It was the industries that were purchasing it. So the grocery stores, things like that, or the delivery, they're the ones that are holding it. Once it leaves that cooling house or packing house or mill or refinery, it's now on that person. So a lot of people don't realize it because they said, oh, the farmers aren't, producing. No, the farmers are producing. They actually worked out that agreement a year prior. So everything they're producing now, they've already worked on that sale a year ago. And so that's like another big thing. But to what you were saying, Artis, and I'm probably not the norm in this, but when I dive in 100% and I really try to learn, and I try to learn from every different aspect, every different commodity so that I could have a little knowledge of stuff. But my biggest thing is for me, I generally take on that I feel like I have a responsibility for that farm that I'm on, and I want people to know about it. And they might not necessarily be, in my business plan or agreeing in it, but I feel personally that I have to protect them. And so that's why I have so much passion for what I do, because I appreciate all that they do. And so sometimes I feel like I'm a part of the team, whether I am or not, but I really do feel like it.
We need the Jessicas of the world who don't come from an ag background, the Shivas of the world who you wanted to be a part of agriculture, because I grew up in it and artists grew up in it. But without you guys, we're just speaking to ourselves. You know what I mean? So you bring an audience that doesn't have a clue sometimes and allows them to be educated, and you do it in a way that shows so much passion that then they're sparked in a passion of them, hopefully, right? Where they get passionate about agriculture and then it just extends. I met, shout out to Four Rivers Barbecue in Orlando. John Rivers started his barbecue business selling for his church or feeding the church for free, and then it turned into what it is now, which Four Rivers is a very large barbecue entity in the Central Florida area. He is passionate about educating non-ag people about food. He told me a story during COVID of giving students free food, and this one mom kept sending it back with the student. And they finally asked, why do you keep bringing it back? And she said, it's dirty. I don't want dirty produce. And they're like, it's grown from the dirt. But that education, I didn't believe some of those stories sometimes, but to hear it firsthand, it's. So I'm saying people like Jessica, who you are a part of the family. We need all the people that want to learn and talk about agriculture in the right way. We need them. We need them.
So I'm in awe of Shiva because here she came from a country and chose to be an American. But even more importantly, she saw that little tiny garden and she saw the potential. So for the women, young women or girls out there listening, if you want to find a place that you can find a niche that is just to let you soar, it's in agriculture. Whether it's in finance, whether it's in science, whether it's in communication. There are so many jobs out there.
Driving a tractor. Yes, I love seeing that.
I can drive a tractor, yes. I have to do that every now and then. Like Bob says, when the ox in the ditch, you got to do what you got to do. But, and then it was a green tractor too, Bo. I have to tell you. I promise you it was green.
Your favorite color.
And only 2 miles an hour with that new rotavator that we were able to sell. But I love my rotavator now. I'm a rotavator girl. I also learned to disc, which, the main thing there is turn left, turn left, turn left.
Yeah.
And but to sit here and know that these 3 women, they didn't necessarily have an ag background. Yes, Ellie had some in her family, but to see the potential that you have to have that career path, and it's there for any woman who wants to choose it. And women, to me, are so articulate, detailed. a little different than men. I'm sorry, that's just how I believe. And to infuse that into this agriculture world, I believe that has brought agriculture to a new level, having women more involved in agriculture. And part of it is that we have gifts that God gave us totally different, and that it has made a difference in the agriculture world.
That's a stereotype of agriculture. A lot of times they think that it's just for men. But I have to tell you, at least specifically in our company, we have a lot of successful women working in industry and making impact. So for the young ladies, young girls out there, so don't be intimidated by that stereotype. There are lots of opportunities in this industry, different fields of work, obviously. But yeah, join us.
Yeah, my daughter Sarah has her MBA. She went into finance, graduating from Stetson, and was branch manager at a local bank, and then was in, I don't know all the stuff she was in the bank, and chose to leave that. So she's gone to work for C&B Farms. She's our CEO. They have 58 different varieties of vegetables and herbs. And that, seeing her in that role is a very proud moment as a mama, to know that. So for one day she was explaining to a worker about using fuel consumption and keeping up with it. And she's like, get in the truck, let's go. Because this is how my husband Alan, her dad, did. Get in the truck, let's go. Let's go see it up close and personal, even though you live on it every day. And Sarah was explaining to her that this is a riser, and this is how we let the water in and out, but this is a pump, and this is what uses the diesel. And the worker was going, well, how do you know this? And Sarah said, this is what I knew growing up. And so Sarah has that advantage of growing up on a farm and having that ag background, but not an education, a formal education, a college education, but has intertwined that finance background into what a farmer needs to help run his company. And there's so many women out there, young girls looking for a college path, and I would encourage you to look at agriculture.
Yeah. I just came back really quick. I came back from a conference with John Deere dealers from all over the country. There was 1,800 of us there. And the amount of women in the John Deere world is so refreshing. And it was intimidating for even me. I went to sales selling wine for Gallo. Really fun job. And it was intimidating to come back into the family business, and understand where my role as a woman would fit in. And now, like I said, to go to this conference and see the amount of women working in dealerships is so wonderful, because all in the administrative roles, some are working as sales managers, running the dealership. It is there, and it is growing, and it is a beautiful thing. We love the men too, but we love our women. So.
Yeah.
Women. Y'all do. This was awesome. I know you said you had a hard stop at 11. Yeah. So it's so funny, too, because right before you started speaking, Artist, in that last statement, I was going to ask you guys what you would tell to young women, and y'all just took it away. So this was incredible.
Get involved in FFA.
Yeah.
Please, what a better group to be involved in. There's so many opportunities out there, 4-H, FFA, that you can find a niche to get into agriculture.
I'm going to just put it with this. Financially speaking, how lucrative is the agricultural industry for any guys?
That's a tough question, because you just heard a bunch of answers of.
So also, how financially lucrative, you are totally dependent on God and the weather. It doesn't matter what you do to prepare for any year's crop. The weather can change everything that you've done in an instant, and you are always at the mercy of the weather, and it will always be that way. So you don't count on what you're going to make. For us, we count on what we're going to spend. We make sure that we're not going to spend beyond our means, and that's our choice for our business plan. But we always know that God's in control of the weather.
So, and one thing I want to say too is, especially as a young female, my team are all women, and I continuously pour into them and mentor them, and I also connect them with other women who I think have great, that they sync well together, right? And so if I see a quality in somebody that I also see a little bit of quality in one of my staff members, I'll tell them, do you mind if I introduce you to somebody else? I want you to glean off them, really take things from them. And don't be afraid if you see somebody and they have something in them that you want to have or you want to make better, ask them. That's like the biggest compliment, is to go up to somebody and say, I want to be more like you because of this. Or can you spend the time and help me with this? I can't imagine any woman that would say no. and not want to be like, let me help you, let me do this, or let me connect you with that person that can make that happen for you. I do it all the time. I mentor a ton. I have mentors. And you also have the ones that you go to, you're like, okay, give it to me real, right? And you know that you can have that. And that's priceless. But never be afraid to ask.
The saying, farmers are land rich and cash poor. But as somebody wanting to get into the business or the industry, as female jobs, male jobs, it is a reliable industry. So yes, it fluctuates every year with the growth of the crop and things like that, but it is an industry that has been around since the beginning of time. So if you're looking for a job that is reliable, full of wonderful people to work with, full of families, and that the culture, the ethics, the morals are rooted in faith and being the best that you can be, is a job that I would recommend. I came from a sales industry where, yes, money was wild at times, but I just felt yucky some of the days that I'd go to work. I never felt yucky here at work, and yucky's probably not the best word, but I'm proud of who I am and the people I work with.
That's one of my favorite things, specifically about agriculture, is that we always start off with a prayer. Especially if we're going to eat, we always thank the man above for what we're be able to take, right? And who are the ones who are able to grow it. And that's one of my favorite things to do, specifically if we have farmers that are joining us when we have a meal. I always ask, do you mind if I pray over this? Because the person sitting next to you is the one that grew that. And that's pretty powerful. And so that it's very, not a lot of industries will allow you to really talk about your faith or bring that into your work, but we can do that here, and that's pretty special.
That is certainly true.
I think it's important, especially because it kind of roots it in the values of the company. Because I've worked not coming into the ag world recently. Like you can see the difference as far as culture and everything goes, and it's not because Everglades is a sales organization, but it's not. Hey, we're getting don't hit your quotas, get out of here like the other sales orgs I've seen. It's very much like training, helping each other out type deal. And it's refreshing.
Yeah. So when you ask about how lucrative, one of the things that I think is a difference between if you're a vegetable farmer and a sugarcane farmer, when you're a sugarcane farmer and you plant that crop, you've got 3 years of crop that you invested when you plant it once. Because sugarcane is a ratoon crop, it's going to grow back and then you harvest it and you mow it like your grass. Where a vegetable farmer, he's planting sometimes twice a year. So he has a different cost factor than when you're planting sugarcane. So you've got Hurricane Ian coming along and it blows your cane over. And now they come and harvest it. And because the cane's blown over, it actually takes some of the roots with it. Well, every time you take a root out, you've taken your next year crop and your next year crop. And it's so that you're sitting there looking at those roots and going, okay, Lord, we know you're going to provide, and we'll have a better time. And maybe even with Wilma and Irma, we didn't make it 3 years with replanting some of the crop because it was so heavily damaged from the water and the wind damage. It only lasted 2 years. So there's always that factor of weather changing what you thought was your plan for those crops.
And to piggyback on that, one of the things I talk about in tours is, we're very dependent on weather, right? So if something happens with the weather, we can't just stop our production and pick off tomorrow where we left off like you can in a manufacturing company. You have to start from the beginning. And the whole crop is gone. And that happens. And there's not really an insurance to really cover that. So you're really, to give you one prime example, one farmer, Buddy, you guys know who it is, he was growing watermelon. And it was within 2 or 3 days of being harvested. And there was a huge cold front coming in. And he did 3 things. One, similar to what you do at a baseball field, you take a tarp and you run it across and you cover the crop, right, to keep it warm so that you can harvest it later. The second one, he went over and he put, I believe it was like BAS or the paper products tell us on it. And the third one, he prayed to. And that's literally the things that he had to do. And all 3 of them thankfully worked, but he had to be proactive because of, a 6-hour cold front could change his livelihood in that moment. Yeah. And those are things that I really try to hone in on people, that it takes one time for this all to be gone. And unlike other places where you can stop and pick up. And so I try to really make that impact on people, how important that is.